Where we're at today is finishing the ceiling in the upstairs. Really, it's sort of the victory lap on the framing of this house. I think I've hauled today my last serious load of lumber to the site. That's good. There's about probably 900 square feet of ceiling to install at different heights. There's about 4 different heights. The thing that this ceiling has in common, wherever it's happening, is the only load that these joists are going to hold is the load of the drywall and whatever insulation is pushing down on the drywall. Nobody's going to be walking on this. It's not heavy. And so the design and the strength of a ceiling system like this is completely different than the strength of a floor system or a roof system. So we're going to be working on ladders today in the shade, small pieces, nothing's heavy, the wind's not blowing, it's not hot. This is a nice day to be a carpenter. This is what's known as a pressure block. They create a really easy and inexpensive way to make a solid connection. They've been around for years. The pressure block is nailed securely in place to the ledger. The joist is then nailed to the end of the pressure block and toe-nailed to the ledger. And then the next block locks it all in place. Now yes, you could do this with joist hangers, but this is quicker, it's easier. It gives the drywall guy a little extra distance to nail his ceiling up, and since the load is light, there is no downside. About the only other thing to mention about what we're doing here today that maybe is different than what you've watched before is I'm going to do all of this work with this guy. Now, I've used this for about maybe 2 hours before today, so by the end of today, I'm going to have a lot better basis for telling you what I think about a cordless worm drive skill saw. So this probably goes without saying at this point in our series, but with interior ceilings, even more than with interior walls, you've just got to make sure they are flat. In other words, do whatever you've got to do so that all the joists are in a plane. Because if one joist is sitting even just 1/8 of an inch out of line with the others, you're going to have either a hump or a dip in the ceiling. So use a string, use a level, use a straight board, do whatever you've got to do to make sure it's right. The way I did this one is sort of using a process that I use a lot, and that is hanging a straight board at the correct height for the joists to rest on while I nail them in place. It's really the only way to go for something like this. Now yes, it's a little more prep, but it makes it easy for one man to do a 2-man job. The product is always perfect, and so it pays off in the long run, big time. You may not remember that we talked about the fact that we held off on the interior partitions until after the roof was on. Well, sometimes you have to do that because in a case like this, it would have been really a time burner to try to get all these wall heights right and the ceilings in place before the stack went on. But as it turns out, it's a time burner to do it afterwards. You've got to have every trick at your disposal. You've got to be able to level and line and plane. You've got to be able to use boards for props and toenails to hold things up temporarily. It is perhaps the best example so far, except for nailing off the roof, of a situation where a nail gun saves hours and hours. So when you walk into a situation like this, you can just pretty much forget about production. Concentrate instead on making sure your sheetrock backing is where it needs to be, all your lines are straight, all your ceilings are level, you have blocking and backing every place you're ever going to need it, and try not to fall off of your ladder or, if you're lucky enough to have it, your scaffold. In order to fasten our ceiling joists to the side of these rafters, I-joists, I had to add these OSB spacers. You've seen this same type of thing in multiple other places as we've built this house. It is specified in the installation guide that is prepared by the manufacturer, and you better pay attention to it. Using engineered lumber like this has pros and cons. The perfect straightness and uniformity of the joists is clearly on the pro side of the ledger, and the extra effort to fasten to it is certainly a con. That being said, it really is not a big deal. It's strong, it's straight, it will all be covered by drywall, and even if it looks a little funky to the untrained eye, guess what? Nobody is ever going to see this. All right, so putting in these ceilings, and I don't know if you can pick it up on the camera or not, but it illustrates one of the big sort of options that opens up to you if you decide to cut and stack or traditionally frame the roof system on your house. If you use trusses, the height of the ceiling is dictated by the loads and the engineering that can be applied to the span and the truss. And there are some real functional limits. I mean, you can put a scissor truss in and kind of vault the bottom a little bit. You can make an attic truss, which will get you a little bit of usable space in the attic. But whereas in this house, if we would have wanted to, we could have drywalled right to the bottom of the rafters. But the design choice was it was better to put a lower, more conventional ceiling height in the smaller rooms and a higher, loftier, more expansive sort of feel in the spaces that were bigger. So depending on how you want your ceilings in your upstairs or the floor closest to your roof system to look and feel and interact with climate control, that's one of the considerations in whether to hand stack, that is cut the rafters, or order trusses and live with whatever ceiling has to be put in when the engineer specifies the design of the truss. So the cost to build this house is just way different than it could be for someone else, because I and Nate are doing just almost all the labor. I mean, Daniel helped us a lot last summer, but in essence, I mean, when you get right down to it, I'm doing the work and we're paying for the material. If you're interested in these costs, we are sharing those right out of our QuickBooks to our supporters. And so you can go to the notes in the video and find out how to access that information if it would be useful to you. You know, it's funny, but I am not really positive what the next episode is going to be. We're kind of at a fork in the road between whether we go with the exterior concrete or if the painter gets here and starts doing his magic on the outside. But I'll tell you, whoever gets here next and whatever video goes up next, it feels great to be approaching the halfway point on this project. And if you include all the site prep and the retaining walls and all of that work that went into this project, we are past halfway right now. And frankly, it's a relief. It's going to be great to be working with some of the other pros that I've been depending on for the past 24 years here in Southern Oregon, and to have a real opportunity to introduce you to them, give you at least a peek at what they do and why it is that they've become go-to guys for me. Thank you for watching Essential Craftsman, and keep up the good work.